The School Mouse by Dick King Smith, Part 1. Chapter 1, in which Flora makes a start. Flora was a school mouse. Everyone knows that there are house mice, and field mice, and harvest mice, and everyone knows that mice who live inside churches are called church mice, so it's easy to guess where Flora lived. The school was a very old one, nearly 150 years old, in fact, and it stood in the middle of some fields. 42 children went to the school: kindergartners, first graders, second graders, and about the same number of mice. Fathers, mothers, and children lived permanently in its crumbly old walls and ceilings and dark cupboards and under its worn wooden floorboards. But of all these school mice, only one grew up to become interested in learning the same lessons as the children. That was Flora. It was as though Flora was destined to be a very special school mouse, for she was born on the first day of the first half of the new school year, in a hole in the wall of the kindergarten classroom. Immediately behind the teacher's desk there was a cupboard set into the old whitewashed stone wall, and just above the doors of this cupboard there was a small space between two of the stones. High up inside the cupboard a hole had been gnawed, so that a school mouse could run up inside and make its way into the space between the stones. From here, if it peeped out, it would have a fine view of the classroom, including a close-up of the top of the teacher's head a couple of feet below as she sat at her desk. On this particular morning, a particular school mouse did not peep out at the kindergarten classroom, for it was much too busy giving birth to 10 babies, one of which was the infant Flora. All that day the mother mouse lay in the hole in the wall and suckled her new pink naked babies until school had ended and the children had gone home and the cleaning ladies had tidied up and the caretaker had locked up and the old school was empty of all life save for the jackdaws nesting in the chimneys and the school mice. Then at last, easing herself off her sleeping babies, the mother scuttled down into the cupboard and out between its rickety old doors that never quite shut. One jump landed her on top of the teacher's desk, and another onto her chair, down the leg of which she clambered. In the middle of the classroom floor, she could see, was another mouse, pottering about, whiskers twitching. He was searching for any little bits of anything edible that the children might have dropped, and the cleaning ladies missed. What a husband, thought the mother mouse, whose name was Hyacinth. Here am I, brought to bed of 10 children, and he's not even been to visit me. And sharply she called out, Robin! Hyacinth's husband was an untidy fellow whose coat always looked badly in need of grooming. He had lost part of one ear in a fight, and the end of his tail in a trap, and the other school mice called him Ragged Robin. Now at Hyacinth's summons he came hurrying toward her. Hyce, he cried, for it was his habit always to address his wife thus, to rhyme with mice. Hyce, my love, I haven't seen you all day. No, said Hyacinth shortly. And you seem to have grown thinner, more slender, that is, said Robin. Yes, said Hyacinth. Have you been on a diet? No, said Hyacinth. I have simply lost weight. How? Said Robin. You had better come and see. Up the leg of the teacher's chair they went, and onto the desktop, and up inside the cupboard to the hole in the wall. There, said Hyacinth, and she could not keep a note of pride from her voice. All yours. All mine, said Ragged Robin, and he could not keep a note of anxiety from his voice. Did she expect him to look after this swarm of ugly little pink hairless monsters? He had never had children before. What did fathers do? What do I do, Heiss? He asked nervously. Do, said Hyacinth. You don't do anything. It is I who have to suckle them, and keep them warm, and keep them clean, and bring them up to be good mousekins. All you need to do is admire our 10 children. Are they not beautiful? Without doubt, said Robin doubtfully. 10, did you say? He asked. Yes, as alike as peas in a pod. But here, though she was not to know it for quite a while, Hyacinth was wrong. Alike in looks and size the babies might be, and no one, watching them as their hair grew and their eyes opened, and they began to crawl about the nest, could possibly have told one from another. Yet among them, as the weeks went by, and they grew into active, nimble mousekins, was one, a female, who was to develop into the world's most educated school mouse. That one, of course, was Flora. Whether in fact Flora was more intelligent than her 9 brothers and sisters, we shall never know. What is certain is that she was more inquisitive. From an early age, Flora liked to poke her nose into everything. Everything interested her. And why was her favorite word? Why did they live in a school? Why was the school sometimes full of people, mostly small, and why sometimes empty? Why did all of these small people and some big ones come to the school? Why did the little ones look at lots of pieces of paper all joined together, with pictures on them, and strange black marks and squiggles on the white paper? Why did they hold what looked like thin pieces of wood in their fat little hands, and make other black marks on other sheets of paper? All these things Flora observed, for she alone looked outward from the hole in the wall above the teacher's desk in the kindergarten classroom. Always during the school day, Hyacinth and the other 9 kept well back inside, out of sight, but Flora crouched at the dark mouth of the hole, watching everything that went on with the greatest curiosity. Whether she inherited this thirst for knowledge from her matter-of-fact mother, or her somewhat scatter-brained father, we shall again never know. But it did not take her long to discover that neither of them knew the answers to all her many whys. It was up to her to find out. She began the very next morning. One thing that Flora already knew was that at some time in each day, each child came to stand beside the teacher's desk directly below her. The child would bring with it one of those joined together wads of paper and put it down on the desk and open it. Then the teacher would point at the black marks on the paper, one after another, from left to right, and the child would make different noises. Day after day, Flora peered down intently. Day after day, Flora peered down intently, longing to make sense of whatever was going on. But her eyes, though clearly seeing the shape of the printed words on the pages of the reading books, could not interpret them. And her ears, though clearly hearing the child as it read, could not understand the sounds it made. Then, at last, one morning came the great breakthrough that was to make all the difference to Flora's future. She was watching attentively as usual while a little girl stood beside the teacher with her reading book. She was a very little girl, just beginning to learn to read, and the book was a very simple one. On each page was a large colored picture, and below the picture a single word. The first picture, for example, was of a round red fruit, and below it was written APPLE. Flora had never seen an apple, so the sound the child made meant nothing to her, nor had she yet in her short life set eyes on a loaf of BREAD. or mercifully on a C-A-T, or on any of the other objects shown as the pages turn, until the child reached M. There was a picture that Flora immediately recognized, and below it were 5 little black marks on the paper, 5 marks like these: M-O-U-S-E. Well, said the teacher. Mouse, said the child, and in Flora's tiny brain something clicked. Once again she stared hungrily at those 5 little black marks. Mouse, she said to herself. Flora had begun to read. Chapter 2, in which Flora reads a story. The 5 letters, each so different from its fellows, that made up that first word were the key to Flora's progress. As she crouched in the hole in the wall, eagerly watching the children reading from their various books, she began to recognize those strangely shaped black marks. This was especially so when one of them was the first letter of a word that meant something to her. The shape M, for example, stood not only for mouse, but for mother. O was for owl, and though Flora had never seen one, Hyacinth had told them all what made that melancholy nighttime cry outside the old school. And U began a number of common words like us and up and under, while S was for lots of things mice did, like squeak and squirry and sniff, and E for another most important one, eat. One word led to another, and since Flora not only looked but also listened, as each of the children read to the teacher every day, she began to match the shape of the word on the page to the sound that came out of the child's mouth. Never was there such an attentive, hard-working schoolmouse as Flora. As winter vacation approached, something else happened that was to further Flora's education. One weekend, a time when the school mice had the place to themselves, Hyacinth called a family conference in the cupboard in the kindergarten classroom. Ragged Robin had taken little notice of his 10 children, being too busy, like all his fellows, searching for food. But now, summoned by his wife, he gave the Mouseskins his full attention. "I say, Heiss," he cried, "I must congratulate you, my love. You have reared 10 splendid children. How strong and healthy they look." "They are," said Hyacinth. "Say hello to Daddy, children." "Hello, Daddy," chorused the Mouseskins, all except Flora, who said, "Hello, Father," a word that she had recently learned. "And now," said Hyacinth, "say good-bye." "To Daddy?" asked one of the children. "To both of us," said Hyacinth. "It is time you all went to seek your fortunes out in the great wide school." "Yippee!" cried 9 of the Mouseskins, and away they went, out of the cupboard, onto the desk, onto the floor, and out through one or the other of the doors of the kindergarten classroom, rejoicing that they were kindergartners no more. Only Flora remained. She did not at all wish her education to be interrupted. "Mother," she said, "please can I stay here? I like it here. I wouldn't be in your way." "You won't," said Hyacinth, "because I'm not staying. That hole in the wall is drafty. I'm off to find somewhere cozier for the next brood." "Next brood, Heiss," said Robin. "Next brood of what?" "Babies, you booby," said Hyacinth crossly. "Hadn't you noticed?" Ragged Robin looked at his wife. "You seem to have put on weight, grown plumper, that is," he said. "I had not realized." "Hadn't you?" said Hyacinth. "Another lot of babies," said Robin thoughtfully. "And so soon. I don't know how you do it, Heiss." Hyacinth looked at her scruffy husband with an expression that was a mixture of scorn and resignation. Run along, Robin, do, she said, and see if you can find somewhere really comfortable for me. Preferably not in one of the other classrooms. Children are so noisy. Right ho, Heiss, said Ragged Robin. I'll try the staff room first. Meet me there, and off he went. Now, young lady, said Hyacinth, just what is this all about? You saw how anxious your brothers and sisters were to be gone. Why do you want to stay here? Please, mother, said Flora, it's a good place for my lessons. Lessons? Yes, mother, I'm learning to read. To read, said Hyacinth. What on earth does that mean? To make sense of the words in books, mother. It's what the school children are taught to do. They are learning to read, and so am I. It's very interesting. At first, I could only read the odd word here and there, but before long, I hope to be able to read a whole story. Flora, said Hyacinth sternly, I haven't the foggiest idea what you're talking about, except that it's rubbish. Who ever heard of mice doing the same thing that people do? Next thing you'll be walking about on your hind legs. You listen to me, my girl. Just forget all this nonsense. You've got too high an opinion of yourself. That's your trouble. Giving yourself airs and making out you're cleverer than the rest of us. You're just an ordinary school mouse, and don't you forget it. And with this, Hyacinth went out through the cupboard. Doors and dropped carefully because of the burden she was carrying, down to the desk and onto the floor and away. Flora climbed up to the hole in the wall and looked out at the kindergarten classroom. Empty as it was of humans and mice, there was no one to hear her say, I am not an ordinary school mouse. I'm sure I'm not. I'm sure I can learn all sorts of things that no mouse has ever learned before, if only I study hard enough, and then I shall be an extraordinary school mouse. The next day dawned. Flora never forgot that first Monday morning all on her own in the kindergarten classroom. Not that the other mousekins had interrupted her studies. They and their mother had mostly slept during school hours. But it was lovely to feel she had the place to herself now, ready for another happy week's work. As if to celebrate her independence, she did something she had never before dared to do. At midday, the bell rang for lunch, and the children lined up and then left the classroom, followed by the teacher. On her desk, by chance, a reading book had been left wide open, and Flora, seeing this, slipped down and stood before it, her little forepaws upon the edge of the page. How big and bright the pictures were now that she was so close! How bold and black the words! By great good luck the book, called Billy's Pet, was open at page 1, and when Flora had read that and page 2 opposite, she very much wanted to know what happened next. But of course, there was no one to turn over the pages. Billy, the boy in the story, wanted a pet of his own. But is Billy old enough, his father asked his mother, to look after a pet properly? Is he? Thought Flora. Will they let him have one? And if they do, what will it be? A rabbit? A gerbil? A guinea pig? What color will it be? What will it be called? I must know, thought Flora, and carefully she poked her nose under page 2 and flipped it over. Once she had the knack of page turning, keeping each flat with a foot as she read, it was easy. By the time the children came in from the playground at the end of the lunch hour, Flora was safely back in the hole in the wall. On the desk, Billy's Pet lay open at the last 2 pages now. Flora looked down contentedly. I must confess, she said to herself, I do like a happy ending.